Before we dive into this dark story, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because what you're about to hear is one of the most shocking prison cases ever uncovered. Something most people in New York, Texas, or California would never believe could be real. The first sound was a scream, sharp, desperate, echoing through concrete walls. Then came the crash of metal. Detectives later said it felt like the building itself was shaking. A guard yelled for backup, but the hallway lights flickered out. And when the flashlights turned on again, the men standing inside the cell block froze. They saw something no crime report in the United States had ever prepared them for. A whole prison wing controlled completely by inmates. Not one guard in sight. Just rows of men staring back, armed with homemade knives, broken pipes, and weapons that should have been impossible to have. An American investigator from Chicago whispered, "We shouldn't be here." But it was too late. A door slammed behind them. Hours earlier, before the panic, before the smell of smoke, before the moment an entire prison block rose up like a storm, this investigation had started quietly. Detective Mark Holden, an American crime analyst known for working on tough cases from Detroit to Atlanta, was sent to Venezuela to gather evidence on a place whispered about in international crime circles. La Sabaneta Prison, a place so chaotic it was called the prison from hell. Holden had heard rumors for years. Stories of overcrowding, so bad men slept standing up. Reports of gang bosses running entire wings like mini kingdoms. Witness statements describing guards who refused to step inside because they weren't really in charge anymore. But when he read the case files from 1994, the year about 100 prisoners died in a single riot, something inside him twisted. The timeline didn't make sense. The official reports were thin, messy, almost like someone wanted the truth hidden. So he was sent to find that truth. The moment Holden stepped into Maracaibo, the air felt thick, humid, heavy with heat. Locals warned him to stay far from the prison. One man, an old taxi driver, said, "People go in. They don't come out the same." Holden wrote that down in his notebook. He didn't know he'd soon understand exactly what the man meant. Inside La Sabaneta's outer gate, the smell hit first: sweat, smoke, and something rotten. American corrections officers visiting with him shared uneasy glances. The guards at the entrance looked tired, uninterested, almost afraid. One guard, who admitted he was from Houston originally but had worked abroad for years, quietly told Holden, "Listen, just stay behind me. Don't talk to anyone. Don't touch anything. And if you hear running, run the other way." Holden nodded, but the warning only made him more curious. The deeper they walked, the louder the noise became. Shouts, metal clanging, laughter that didn't sound normal. Then silence, like a breath being held. Holden pushed forward, recording everything with a small camera clipped to his vest. Evidence was everything. Case files needed proof. America wanted answers. He stepped into the first cell block. And what he saw didn't look like any prison he'd ever investigated in Los Angeles or Miami. There were no guards inside. Not one. Instead, a tall inmate named Delgado, one of the gang leaders whispered about in old witness statements, stood like a king in the middle of the hallway. He wore a red bandana and held a homemade spear made from a broomstick and a sharpened metal plate. He walked slowly toward Holden's team, confidence in every step. "Welcome," Delgado said. His voice was calm. Too calm. "You're in my house now." Holden felt the hairs on his arms rise. His partner, Officer James Parker from Ohio, tightened his grip on his flashlight. Parker whispered, "Mark, something's off. There's no supervision, no patrol, nothing." Then a loud thud shook the floor, followed by another and another. Holden spun around. Smoke slipped from under a distant doorway. Someone shouted for water. Someone else yelled that the West Wing was breaking loose. A rumor rushed through the hall like wind. A riot was starting again. Parker grabbed Holden's arm. "Mark, this is the same wing where the 1994 massacre started." Before Holden could answer, a door at the far end burst open and dozens of inmates began running toward them, shouting, armed, desperate. The hallway lights flickered. Someone screamed. And then, everything exploded into chaos. The explosion of noise hit Mark Holden like a wave. Inmates sprinted forward, their footsteps pounding the concrete floor. For a split second, all he could hear was breathing, his own, fast and sharp, mixed with the shouts echoing through the hallway. Officer Parker pushed him back toward the wall as smoke drifted from the west wing. It felt like the whole prison was vibrating. Holden's mind raced through the evidence timeline he'd studied in Dallas. This is how the 1994 massacre began: sudden, fast, unstoppable. But then, just as quickly as the chaos surged, everything slowed. Delgado, the gang leader with the red bandana, stepped out in front of the rushing men and raised his hand. The crowd stopped like a frozen wave. It didn't make sense. No guard had that kind of control. No official investigator, no detective, nobody with authority from Washington or New York could silence a mob like that. Yet Delgado did it with a simple gesture. Holden felt confusion mix with fear. It became clear, this prison didn't run on rules. It ran on power. Delgado looked at the panicked American officers with strangely calm eyes. "You see," he said softly, "this place listens to us, not them." He pointed toward the guards outside the block. Some were hiding behind gates, afraid to step in. Holden scribbled in his notebook, "Guards surrender control to inmates," but the pencil shook in his hand. The hallway went quiet, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the kind that filled a room before something worse happened. The smoke thickened. The inmates stepped aside as Delgado gestured for the Americans to follow him deeper into the block. Holden hesitated. Every instinct told him to turn around. But he needed evidence. He needed the truth, something stronger than rumors in old case files. So he followed. They moved through a narrow corridor lit only by flickering bulbs. The temperature rose. The smell changed again, hot metal, sweat, and something burnt. A small radio somewhere crackled with a news station from Miami, the voice of the reporter almost mocking the calm outside this concrete nightmare. As they walked, Holden noticed details that didn't add up. Doors welded shut, rooms converted into weapon workshops, pipes bent into spears, wires pulled from broken lights. He whispered to Parker, "This isn't just a prison. This is a city inside a cage." Parker nodded. A city without laws. When they reached the courtyard, the noise was different. Not shouting, not fighting. A low hum of people murmuring, waiting, watching. Hundreds of inmates stood in groups, eyeing the Americans like they were visitors from another world. Holden felt their stares press against his skin. He wondered how many had been part of the 1994 riot. How many had witnessed things never written in any official report. One man approached the detective. His name, he said, was Mateo. He spoke with a soft voice, but held himself like someone who had survived too many battles. "You want the truth?" Mateo said. "Then look around. We sleep with rats. We fight for water. We bury our dead with our hands. And nobody in the government cares." He pointed toward a tall concrete wall stained with smoke. That wall burned for 3 days in '94. Nobody came. Holden felt a tightness in his chest. This wasn't just a dangerous place. It was a place abandoned. But the calm didn't last. The hum of voices faded suddenly. Delgado stiffened. Mateo whispered, "Something's wrong." Holden turned toward the far gate and saw shadows moving rapidly. Inmates whispered the same name over and over, Los Falcon, another gang, the rivals who controlled the northern wing. Parker whispered, "Mark, this is about to break." And then, like someone flipping a switch, the tension snapped. Los Falcon burst into the courtyard carrying metal rods, shields made from ripped doors and torches. They shouted battle cries that echoed off the cracked walls. Delgado's gang stepped forward, ready to defend their territory. Men began running in every direction. Screams tore through the air. A guard outside shouted into a radio for help, but no one responded. Holden realized what was happening. This wasn't a fight. This was the start of a new riot. A riot that could turn into another massacre. Before he could react, a burning object, something wrapped in cloth, flew through the air and landed at Holden's feet. Flames shot upward. The heat was instant and fierce. Parker grabbed him and pulled him back as the courtyard erupted in chaos. A siren somewhere began to wail. An explosion thundered from the northern wing. And suddenly, the entire courtyard burst into a full-scale prison war. The courtyard exploded into motion. Men ran. Torches flew. Metal clashed against metal. The noise was so loud that Mark Holden felt it inside his ribs. Officer Parker pulled him behind a broken wall as Los Falcon charged across the courtyard, crashing into Delgado's men with a force that felt unreal. It was like watching two storms collide. Holden tried to steady his breathing, but the heat, smoke, and screams pressed in on him from every direction. A brick shattered inches from his head. He ducked low, whispering, "This is exactly how the '94 massacre began." But then, out of nowhere, the chaos dipped for a moment. A strange hush drifted over part of the courtyard. Holden peeked through the dust. Some inmates were backing away, stepping aside, pointing toward something near the northern entrance. It wasn't Delgado. It wasn't Los Falcon. It was a group of smaller inmates, thin, scared, unarmed, trapped between both gangs. They couldn't run. They couldn't hide. They were stuck in the middle of a battlefield. And for the first time since the riot started, Holden saw something like mercy. A tall inmate wearing a bandage over his face stepped forward. He didn't belong to either side. He lifted both hands high and shouted for the charging men to stop. Incredibly, some of them slowed. Not stopped, but slowed. Just enough for a cluster of younger inmates to break free and run toward a corridor on the west side. It lasted only seconds, but it felt like a whole chapter of a different story. One about survival, not violence. Then the storm hit again. Los Falcon roared and pushed forward with renewed fury. The sparks shot into the air as metal scraped concrete. Delgado shouted orders to his men, pointing toward the Americans' position. Holden felt a spike of fear. If either gang turned on them, there would be no escape. Not in the smoke. Not in this maze of burning hallways. Not with hundreds of prisoners fighting like they had nothing left to lose. A roar came from above. Holden looked up. The second-floor walkway, already cracked, already unstable, was shaking. Too many inmates had crowded onto it, swinging pipes down at their rivals. The steel supports groaned. Parker grabbed Holden's shirt. "Mark, move. Move." They darted away just as the walkway gave one long, deep creak and collapsed. The crash was deafening. Dust exploded upward like a gray cloud. Men were thrown from the railing. Others were buried under falling bricks. The ground trembled. Even the gangs paused at the sight. For a few seconds, nobody fought. The silence that followed was heavy, thick, uneasy, the kind that could turn into either surrender or insanity. Holden coughed and wiped dust from his eyes. He saw Delgado rise slowly, limping but standing. Across the courtyard, Los Falcon's leader spit blood onto the ground and pointed toward the Americans. "Get them," he yelled. "They're witnesses." Parker's eyes went wide. "Mark, they're coming." Holden didn't hesitate. "Run." They sprinted toward a side corridor, dodging debris and slipping past panicked inmates. Smoke thickened the air until it stung their eyes. The hallway twisted left and right, turning into a maze of shadows. A loud bang echoed behind them, someone breaking open a metal door. They didn't look back. They burst into a storage room filled with buckets, old mattresses, and broken chairs. Parker slammed the door shut and braced it with a metal bar. They could hear footsteps pounding in the hallway, voices shouting. The bar shook. The door rattled. Holden searched the room with frantic eyes. There has to be another way out. Then he saw it, a small opening in the back wall, half covered by cardboard. A ventilation tunnel, wide enough to crawl through. It wasn't safe, but staying here was worse. Parker nodded. "Go. Now." They crawled into the darkness, moving on knees and elbows, the metal floor scraping their uniforms. The sound of fighting continued behind them, distant, echoing, endless. The tunnel twisted, then tilted down, then opened into a lower service hall. Cool air hit their faces. For the first time since the riot began, they could breathe. Ahead, they saw daylight. A broken grate. the outer yard, freedom. They stepped into the open just as a group of Venezuelan guards rushed in, backed by soldiers. At least 30 of them. Sirens wailed. Radios crackled with frantic Spanish orders. The cavalry had finally arrived, but hours too late to stop the carnage. Holden and Parker stumbled forward, covered in ash and sweat. A medic grabbed Parker's arm, but Holden fell to his knees, staring back at the ruined prison behind them. Smoke rose from every wing. The walls were cracked. The screams still echoed. Inside, the gangs were still fighting. A lieutenant asked Holden what he had seen inside. Holden looked up, voice low, shaken. "I saw the truth," he said. "La Sabaneta isn't a prison. It's a battlefield pretending to be one." He closed his notebook, dust falling from its edges. And if the world doesn't pay attention, this will happen again. Behind him, the gates slammed shut, trapping the chaos inside. The final sound was a low rumble from deep within the prison, one last reminder of the world's most dangerous prison, a place ruled not by law, but by desperation, fire, and fear. La Sabaneta Prison from hell, exposed at last.